What if I told you that long before the pharaohs built their mighty pyramids, there existed a vision, an ancient blueprint that aimed to turn Egypt into nothing less than a reflection of heaven on earth? A vision so mysterious, some believe it was born from the lost wisdom of Atlantis itself. Could the temples of Egypt be more than stone monuments? Could they be echoes of a forgotten paradise? Welcome to Decoding History and Science. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating mysteries ever told, the Atlantean Vision. Why did the ancient Egyptians design their temples and pyramids in such precise alignment with the stars? Could it be that they weren't just building for the living but were trying to recreate heaven on earth? And how does Atlantis, that legendary lost civilization, fit into this story? Stay with me until the very end, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see Egypt forever. By the time we reach the end, you'll understand why some scholars believe Egypt itself was Atlantis reborn. Chapter 1. The Lost Blueprint. When we think of Egypt, most of us picture pyramids rising out of the desert, golden tombs, and hieroglyphs etched into stone. But what if all of this, the entire Egyptian civilization, was not just a cultural achievement, but the unfolding of an ancient blueprint? A blueprint that, according to legend, didn't begin in Egypt at all, but in a place lost to time, Atlantis. Let's rewind thousands of years to the time of the Greek philosopher Plato. He was the first to write about Atlantis in detail. He described it as a mighty island civilization, advanced in knowledge, technology, and order. But it fell into corruption, angered the gods, and was swallowed by the sea. Most historians see this as a myth, a story told for moral lessons. But here's the twist: Plato claimed his story came from Egypt itself. The tale begins with Solon, a Greek lawmaker who traveled to Egypt around 600 BCE. There, in the city of Sais, priests told him something extraordinary. They said Greece was a very young civilization compared to Egypt. They said that much of humanity's true history had been lost in floods and fires, but Egypt had preserved its memory. And in that memory was the story of a powerful land, Atlantis. Now, why does this matter for Egypt? Because if the priests were right, then Egypt was not just another kingdom, was the keeper of an ancient legacy, one that reached back to a forgotten world. Think about that for a second. What if the pharaohs weren't inventing their culture from scratch, but instead following a master plan, something passed down to them from the survivors of Atlantis? When you look at Egyptian architecture through this lens, things start to change. The temples don't look like random shrines. The pyramids don't seem like simple tombs. Instead, they begin to look like pieces of a grand design, structures built with cosmic precision. For example, let's talk about alignment. The pyramids of Giza are aligned so perfectly with the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, that even today, with all our technology, it's hard to achieve that accuracy. How did they do this thousands of years ago? And here's where the blueprint theory comes in. Some researchers believe the Egyptians were copying something much older, something that already existed in the minds of their ancestors. This Atlantean vision wasn't just about building impressive structures. It was about recreating harmony on Earth, a civilization that was meant to reflect the perfection of the cosmos. Imagine this: a group of survivors after losing their homeland, carrying fragments of knowledge, star maps, sacred geometry, and wisdom about balance and order. They arrive in Egypt, and over generations, they embed this knowledge into stone, into myths, into rituals. What we see today as Egyptian culture may, in fact, be the last echo of Atlantis. And it's not just about myth. Many scholars have pointed out that Egyptian civilization seemed to appear suddenly. Fully formed around 3000 BCE, writing, architecture, mathematics, astronomy all advanced from the start. Civilizations usually evolve slowly, but Egypt was different. Could this be the fingerprint of an older source of knowledge? The question then becomes, if Egypt was carrying out a lost blueprint, what exactly were they building? Were they simply honoring their gods, or were they trying to recreate something much bigger? Something like heaven itself, here on earth. But here's the shocking part. When we compare Egypt's monuments to the stars, we find a mirror image: the heavens above and Egypt below. Was this coincidence or deliberate? In the next chapter, we'll explore how Egypt became a living map of the sky. Chapter 2. As above, so below. Now that we've explored the idea of a lost blueprint carried from Atlantis into Egypt, we have to ask what exactly was in that blueprint. One phrase captures it perfectly: as above, so below. This simple yet profound principle comes from Hermetic philosophy, which many believe has roots in ancient Egypt. The idea is that the heavens above and the earth below are reflections of each other. What happens in the cosmos is mirrored here on earth, and what is created on earth, in turn, is tied to the cosmos. It sounds poetic, but the Egyptians took it literally. Let's start with the pyramids of Giza. If you've ever seen an image of Orion's belt, the three stars Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mentakul, notice something striking. Their arrangement matches the three pyramids of Giza almost exactly. The two larger pyramids line up neatly with the brighter stars, while the smaller pyramids sit slightly offset, just like the faintest star in the belt. Now, imagine being an ancient Egyptian priest, looking up at the night sky. To you, Orion wasn't just a constellation. Orion was Osiris, the god of death and resurrection. Building the pyramids to mirror Orion was not just clever astronomy, was a way of literally embedding heaven into Earth's surface. And that's just the beginning. The Nile River itself has been compared to the Milky Way. Flowing through Egypt like a cosmic river, the Nile mirrors the great celestial river above. Imagine standing on the banks of the Nile thousands of years ago, looking up at the stars reflecting in the water. To the Egyptians, it wasn't a coincidence. It was divine design. Then there's Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. To the Egyptians, Sirius was sacred, associated with the goddess Isis. Each year, the rising of Sirius in the dawn sky marked the flooding of the Nile, the lifeline of Egypt. They planned their calendars, their harvests, even their festivals around this star. When Sirius appeared, it was as if heaven itself was sending a signal that life on earth would be renewed. This was not just spirituality, it was survival. By tying their rituals, their temples, and even their farming cycles to the heavens. The Egyptians ensured their civilization thrived in harmony with the cosmos. But here's where things get even more fascinating. Temples across Egypt weren't just placed randomly. Many were oriented to the sunrise or sunset on solstices and equinoxes. Some were aligned with specific stars or constellations. Walk into a temple at dawn on the right day of the year, and sunlight would flood directly through its entrance, illuminating statues of the gods. Think about that. Structures of stone designed with such precision that they could track the movements of the heavens over centuries. And all of this thousands of years before modern astronomy. So let me ask you, how did they know all this? Were they simply brilliant observers of the sky? Or did they inherit this knowledge from an older civilization, perhaps one that already mastered the art of mapping heaven onto earth? The concept of as above, so below wasn't just symbolic. It was operational. Egyptians believed their pharaohs were not only rulers of the land, but guardians of cosmic balance. By aligning temples and pyramids with the stars, the pharaoh was ensuring that the order of the universe was maintained. If the stars were reflected properly on Earth, then Egypt was in harmony. This idea is echoed in their myths. In the story of Nut, the sky goddess, she stretches her body over the earth, dotted with stars. Beneath her lies Geb, the earth god. Their eternal embrace is the perfect symbol of the heavens and the earth in constant union. For the Egyptians, the universe wasn't distant, it was right here, living with them. And we see this reflected again and again. From Karnak Temple's alignment with the solstice sunrise to Abu's symbol, where sunlight illuminates statues deep inside the temple only twice a year. Every sacred site was a cosmic clock, ticking in harmony with the universe. But here's the part that will give you chills. When archaeologists and astronomers map these alignments, they don't just find a connection to the skies of today. They find alignments that match skies thousands of years ago, sometimes pointing to 10,000 BCE or earlier. That's long before Egypt's official history even begins. So what does that mean? Could these monuments be preserving star maps from a forgotten age? A memory of a time before Egypt. Maybe even a time before the great floods that Plato described. If that's true, then the Egyptians weren't just practicing astronomy. They were executing a mission. They were turning Earth into a mirror of heaven. And if Earth was meant to mirror heaven, then what about the people who ruled it? What role did the pharaohs play in this cosmic drama? If Egypt was the mirror of heaven, then the pharaohs were the keepers of the reflection. But were they just kings? Or cosmic architects chosen to carry out a mission far older than Egypt itself? Chapter 3. Pharaohs as divine architects. When we think of pharaohs, it's easy to picture golden crowns, royal palaces, and armies marching under their banners. But to the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh was far more than a political ruler. He was the beating heart of Egypt, the bridge between heaven and earth. The Egyptians believed their pharaohs were semi-divine beings. Each one carried the spirit of Horus, the falcon god. During life and upon death, they became one with Osiris, the lord of the afterlife. This wasn't just mythology, it was statecraft. The pharaoh wasn't ruling just for himself, but for the entire cosmic balance of the world. Their duty was to uphold the principle of order, justice, and harmony. Math wasn't simply law and fairness. It was cosmic truth itself. If math was broken, chaos would spread not just in society, but in the universe. The Nile might not flood, crops could fail, enemies might rise, and the stars could fall out of alignment. Imagine the weight of responsibility. If you were Pharaoh, your job wasn't just collecting taxes or commanding soldiers was ensuring that the heavens and earth remained in harmony. And how did they do this? Through architecture. Every pyramid, every temple, every sacred complex was more than a building. It was a physical embodiment of math. Stone wasn't just stone, it was order carved into the earth. Temples weren't just places of worship. They were machines of cosmic alignment. When a pharaoh commissioned a new temple or a new pyramid, he was literally participating in the divine act of creation, bringing heaven to earth. Take the Pyramid of Khufu at Giza, for example. For centuries, people thought it was simply a giant tomb. But look closer and you see precision beyond reason. The base is perfectly square, aligned almost exactly with the 4 cardinal directions. Its slope encodes the mathematical constant pi. Its interior passages point directly to important stars like Orion and Sirius. This isn't just a gravitz, a star map in stone, a portal designed to link the pharaoh's soul with the heavens. Think of the pharaoh not as a king building a palace, but as a divine architect building a ladder to eternity. Each project was both a political statement and a spiritual mission. Now pause for a moment and imagine this. You're standing in ancient Egypt. The pharaoh commands a new temple to be built. Thousands of workers gather. Architects carefully measure with ropes and shadows. Priests chant prayers as the foundation is laid. To the ordinary farmer or soldier, it may look like construction. But to the priests, to the pharaoh, it is the recreation of heaven on earth. Every stone placed is an act of worship. Every wall painted with stars and gods is a reminder that earth is only a reflection of the divine world above. But here's the fascinating question. How did the pharaohs know the secrets of sacred geometry, astronomy, and divine proportion? Were they simply geniuses of observation? Or did they inherit this knowledge from an older source in Atlantean legacy passed down through priests and initiates? This theory becomes even more compelling when we look at Egyptian myths. They spoke of the Zep Tepi the first time when gods walked the earth and gave humans wisdom. According to legend, this was a golden age before floods and disasters reshaped the world. Many researchers have wondered, could Zep Tepi be a memory of Atlantis? Time when divine kings or advanced beings brought knowledge that the pharaohs were later sworn to preserve. If that's true, then each pharaoh wasn't just building monuments. He was carrying out a sacred oath. His crown wasn't just gold, it was the weight of an ancient mission. His palaces weren't just for ruling, they were blueprints of paradise. And here's something striking. Pharaohs often referred to themselves not as inventors of their monuments, but as restorers of something older. Inscriptions say they rebuilt temples as they were in the first time. This suggests they saw themselves not as creators, but but as guardians keepers of an ancient design that had to be replicated again and again to preserve the cosmic order. So, was Egypt's greatness really the product of one culture's genius? Or was it the careful preservation of a vision far older than Egypt itself? And if the pharaohs were divine architects, then who were the true architects behind them? Who first passed down the blueprint that Egypt would follow for thousands of years? But here's the twist: of pharaohs were following a sacred plan. Then the question remains, who gave them that plan? Was it born in Egypt, or was it carried from the ashes of Atlantis itself? To answer that, we must follow the trail back to the most mysterious connection of all. Chapter 4. The Atlantean Weave, seen how Egypt aligned its monuments with the stars, and how pharaohs acted as divine architects upholding cosmic order. But we're left with one pressing question. Where did all this knowledge come from? To answer that, we need to follow a trail that leads us beyond Egypt, back into legend. Back into a world said to have vanished beneath the sea, Atlantis. The connection between Egypt and Atlantis isn't a modern invention. It goes all the way back to Plato, around 360 BCE. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato described Atlantis as a mighty civilization that lived over 9,000 years before his time. That would place it around 11,600 years ago in Canoli, close to the end of the last ice age. According to Plato, Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined. It had advanced cities, fertile lands, and a navy that ruled the seas. But over time, its people became greedy and corrupt. The gods grew angry, and Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. Swallowed by the ocean, gone forever. Most historians dismiss this as allegory. But here's the twist. Plato claimed he didn't invent the story. He said he got it from his ancestor Solon, who heard it directly from Egyptian priests. The priests told Solon something shocking. They said the Greeks remembered only one great flood, but in truth, humanity had endured many. Civilizations had risen and fallen long before Greece. Egypt, protected by the Nile's slow floods, preserved the memory, and Atlantis was one of those lost worlds. This means that, according to the Egyptians themselves, they were keepers of a legacy far older than their own civilization. If true, then Egypt was not the beginning of history, but the continuation of something even greater. Now stop and think about that for a moment. What if the pyramids and temples weren't innovations of Egypt, but the echoes of Atlantis rebuilt in stone? What if the pharaohs weren't just kings, but inheritors of a mission to preserve a paradise that had once existed and was lost? Let's look at Egypt's own myths. They spoke of Zep-Tepi the first time, when gods and demigods ruled on earth before human kings. This golden age ended in disaster, followed by the rise of dynasties we know today. Doesn't that sound eerily similar to Plato's Atlantis? Time of greatness destroyed, followed by survival and rebirth? And then there's the question of sudden knowledge. Egypt, unlike most civilizations, appeared almost overnight around 3100 BC. Writing, advanced art, mathematics, architecture fully developed from the start. Most cultures crawl slowly into complexity, but Egypt seemed to leap. Could this be because their priests and rulers were carrying knowledge already ancient in their time, knowledge inherited from survivors of Atlantis? Archaeologists point to megalithic structures that predate dynastic Egypt. The Sphinx, for instance, shows signs of weathering that suggest it may be thousands of years older than we think, perhaps dating back to a wetter climate around 10,000 BCE. If that's true, then Egypt's most iconic monument might not even be Egyptian in origin. It might be Atlantean. Imagine survivors of a cataclysm flood swallowing their homeland, cities gone in a single night. They scatter across the world, carrying fragments of their knowledge. Some end up in the Americas, some in the Mediterranean, and some in the Nile Valley. There, they rebuild, not just for themselves, but to ensure humanity never forgets. They teach astronomy, geometry, sacred order. They help design temples that mirror the stars, pyramids that encode universal constants, myths that preserve the story of a lost golden age. Over centuries, these survivors become remembered not as ordinary men, but as gods. Could this explain why Egyptian gods often appear as hybrid beings, half human, half divine? Were they symbolic portrayals of those who once carried otherworldly knowledge? So real mystery. Were the gods of Egypt memories of Atlantis as survivors? Were Osiris and Isis, the great divine pair, once leaders of a lost civilization, mythologized through time? Even Plato hinted at this. In Critias, he describes Atlantis's kings as sons of Poseidon, god of the sea. Their power came from divine lineage, just as pharaohs claimed descent from the gods. Two stories, two cultures, the same theme. Rulers chosen to maintain cosmic harmony until chaos broke it apart. And here's where it gets even stranger. Modern geological evidence shows that around 11,600 years ago, when Plato places Atlanta's massive climate shifts took place, sea levels rose, glaciers melted, catastrophic floods swept across the world. Could these events be the historical seed behind the myth? If so, then Atlantis may not just be a story. It may have been a real culture whose survivors seeded the rise of Egypt. If this is true, then the temples of Egypt are more than just history. They are Atlantis reborn, a second chance to recreate heaven on earth. And that leads us to an even deeper mystery. If Egypt was Atlantis reborn, then the knowledge hidden in its monuments may not only preserve the past hit, may be pointing to the future. If Atlantis's survivors carried their knowledge to Egypt, then the temples and pyramids are more than monuments. They're coded messages from a lost civilization. But what exactly is hidden in their design? To uncover that, we must explore the sacred geometry of the gods themselves. Chapter 5. Sacred Geometry of the Gods. Egypt was not just a land of pharaohs and pyramids. It was a land of numbers, of proportions, of patterns hidden in stone. To the Egyptians, geometry was not a tulet, was a sacred language, a bridge between the human and the divine. The Greeks later gave it a name, geometry, meaning measurement of the earth. But in Egypt, it was more than measurement. It was the foundation of creation itself. Let's begin with the pyramids. At first glance, they seem like massive stone mountains, rising in the desert with simple triangular sides. But when we look closer, the numbers hidden in their design reveal something extraordinary. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, encodes the number pi 3.14159 and the golden ratio, phi 1.618. These are not random. They are the fundamental numbers that govern spirals of seashells, the branching of trees, even the proportions of the human body. It's as if the pyramid is not just a tomb, but a mathematical mirror of life itself. Now ask yourself, how did a civilization over 4,000 years ago discover constants we only formally defined in the modern age? Was this knowledge inherited, remembered, or perhaps rediscovered? The pyramid's base, when divided by its height, gives a near-perfect approximation of pi. Its slope mirrors the golden ratio. And when scaled, its dimensions align with the Earth itself. The base perimeter corresponds almost exactly to the circumference of the equator, and its height relates to the Earth's radius. In other words, the Great Pyramid is not just a monumentese, a scale model of the planet. But the geometry doesn't stop there. Egyptian temples themselves were built using precise grids and proportions. Each hall, each column, was measured to resonate with harmony. The temple was a microcosm of the universe, a replica of creation. When priests walked through its sacred halls, they weren't just performing rituals, they were walking through the cosmic order itself. And then there is the lotus. The lotus flower, so sacred in Egyptian art, unfolds its petals in perfect mathematical progression. Its pattern mirrors the geometry of creation. The Egyptians carved it into their temples and placed it in the hands of gods. To them, it symbolized rebirth, but it also encoded nature's hidden mathematics. Look at your own body. Stretch your arms wide, and your proportions fall into the golden ratio. Your heartbeat follows rhythms based on geometry. Your DNA itself coils into spirals that reflect the same constants. Now think about this. The Egyptians encoded these numbers in their monuments. Were they trying to tell us that humanity itself is part of a universal design? The ancients didn't separate math from the divine. To them, geometry was a form of prayer. Building in sacred proportions meant aligning human creation with cosmic truth. That's why their temples feel so timeless, because they weren't designed for mortals alone. They were designed for eternity. Some researchers even suggest that chanting and rituals performed inside temples were amplified by geometry. The angles of walls and ceilings created resonance chambers. The spoken word itself would vibrate with power. Sound, geometry, and spirit merged into one. But here's where it gets even stranger. Many of these same proportions appear not only in Egypt, but across the ancient world. At Stonehenge, in Mexico, at Angkor, in Cambodia, we find the same numbers, the same alignments. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia, all building with the same hidden code. Is this a coincidence or a sign of a shared legacy? Perhaps one passed down from an older, forgotten source, Atlantis. And the Egyptians themselves admitted their knowledge was not their own. In their myths, the god Thoth was said to be the keeper of all wisdom, the master of writing, magic, astronomy, and geometry. Some legends even say he wrote down his secrets in the fabled emerald tablets hidden away until humanity is ready to understand them. Could it be that Thoth was not merely a god, but a memory of an Atlantean teacher who brought geometry to Egypt? A being remembered through myth because his knowledge was too extraordinary to be seen as human. If so, then the sacred geometry of Egypt is not simply art, it is survival. A code from the past, preserved in stone, whispering to us across millennia. And perhaps, just perhaps, if we decoded fully, we might uncover not only who the Egyptians were, but who we truly are. If geometry was their sacred language, then temples and pyramids were their scriptures. But the real question is, what were they trying to preserve? To find out, we must dive into the myths of gods who walked among men beings who may not have been mythical at all. Chapter 6. Gods or Ancient Astronauts. Every great civilization has its myths of gods descending from the heavens. In Greece, Zeus ruled from Mount Olympus. In Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki descended from the sky. And in Egypt, perhaps the most mysterious of all the gods walked among men. The question is, were these gods simply metaphors or memories of something real? The Egyptians believed their civilization was a gift from divine beings. At the dawn of time, according to myth, there was chaos, dark waters swirling with no order. Then came the first god, Adam, who created the world. But the story doesn't end there. Egypt's pantheon is filled with beings who were said to physically rule the land before the pharaohs. They weren't distant deities. They were kings, rulers, teachers. Take Osiris, for example. In myth, he was not just a god of the afterlife. He was described as a king who once ruled Egypt, bringing agriculture, law, and civilization itself. He traveled the world, teaching humanity how to live in harmony. His wife, Isis, was a healer and protector. His son, Horus, was said to have reigned on earth before ascending to the sky. Now think about that for a moment. These aren't stories of invisible beings. They sound like accounts of powerful figures who taught knowledge beyond what ordinary humans could achieve at the time. Here's where it gets intriguing. Ancient texts like the Turin King list describe rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the known dynasties. Historians usually dismiss these as myths or symbolic exaggerations. But what if they're not exaggerations at all? What if the so-called gods were real beings with lifespans far greater than our own? Modern researchers have asked the question many hesitate to voice. Could these gods have been visitors from somewhere beyond Earth? When we look at Egyptian art, we see gods depicted with animal heads. Falcon-headed Horus, jackal-headed Anubis, ibis-headed Thoth. But what if these weren't just symbolic? What if they were attempts to describe beings who looked unlike humans' figures, so strange? The only way to portray them was through hybrid imagery. And then there's the technology. The precision of pyramid construction. The alignment of temples with solstices and star movements. The sudden leap of Egyptian civilization, appearing fully formed around 3000 BCE. Was this really the result of human trial and error, or the transfer of knowledge from advanced teachers? Let's ask the uncomfortable question. If today, spacecraft landed in the desert and beings emerged with advanced knowledge, how would we describe them? Would we call them scientists, or would we call them gods? Now, Imagine such a visitation thousands of years ago. The memory of that encounter would be passed down generation after generation until it became myth. Supporters of the ancient astronaut theory point to myths of the gods returning to the stars. Osiris was said to ascend into Orion. Isis was linked with Sirius, Horus with the sun itself. Were these poetic metaphors or literal descriptions of beings departing to the heavens? Even the pyramids may hold a clue. In many depictions, the pyramid is shown as a stairway, a ladder of light. The pharaoh, upon death, was said to ascend the pyramid and join the gods in the sky. Could the pyramids have been more than tombs? Could they have served as symbolic or even technological gateways to the stars? Of course, mainstream Egyptology rejects this idea. To them, these are just myths, and the pyramids are monuments to human genius. But here's the catch. Even Egypt's own priests admitted their knowledge came from the gods. They never claimed ownership of it. They saw themselves as keepers, not inventors. And let's not forget Thoth, the god of wisdom. He was said to have given humanity writing, numbers, astronomy, even magic. Legends say he arrived in a shining boat from the heavens. Now ask yourself, what would a shining boat from the heavens look like to people 5,000 years ago? Could it be what we today would call a spacecraft? Whether you see them as literal beings from another world or as symbols of a higher consciousness, the truth remains. Egypt's gods were remembered as real. They shaped the civilization, guided its rulers, and left behind monuments aligned with the stars. And if they were real, the question is, where did they go? And are they watching us still? If Egypt's gods were once real beings, then their knowledge must have been preserved, and perhaps it still exists today, hidden in a secret library said to hold the wisdom of the ages. In the next chapter, we'll journey into the mystery of the Lost Hall of Records. Chapter 7. The Hall of Records for Centuries. Whispers have circulated about a secret chamber hidden beneath the sands of Egypt. A chamber that, according to legend, holds the lost knowledge of Atlantis, preserved by the ancient Egyptians for a future age. This legendary vault is known as the Hall of Records. The idea first gained attention through the writings of the Greek historian Herodotus, and later through ancient Egyptian priests themselves. Atopia's secret chambers beneath the Great Pyramid and under the Sphinx places that contain scrolls, tablets, and maps of the heavens. But what truly brought the Hall of Records into modern mystery was the work of a 20th century American psychic named Edgar Cayce. Cayce, often called the Sleeping Prophet, gave thousands of readings while in trance. Among them were stunning claims that survivors of Atlantis traveled to Egypt around 10,500 BCE and built the Sphinx as a marker. Beneath it, he said, they placed a library containing the history of Atlantis, records of humanity's origin, and prophecies of the future. Mainstream scholars dismissed Cayce's visions as imagination. But here's the strange part. Years after his predictions, modern researchers began discovering anomalies beneath the Sphinx. In the 1990s, teams using ground-penetrating radar detected large rectangular cavities beneath the paws of the Sphinx. These voids, some say, match Case's description of hidden chambers. To this day, Egypt's authorities have been cautious about allowing full excavations. Why? What might lie buried beneath the sands untouched for thousands of years? If the Hall of Records exists, what could it contain? Imagine ancient scrolls detailing the rise and fall of Atlantis. Star charts far older than our recorded history. Instructions on sacred geometry, energy, and the laws of the cosmos. Perhaps even technology we can barely comprehend. For the Egyptians, knowledge was sacred. It wasn't just information, it was power. They believed that by preserving the wisdom of the past, they could guide the future. The Hall of Records, if real, may not simply be a library. It may be a time capsule left behind for humanity to rediscover at the right moment. Ask yourself this: why does so much of ancient Egypt remain unexplored? Even today, less than 30% of Egypt's ruins have been excavated. Miles of desert may still hide secrets that could change everything we think we know about human history. What if the missing link, the proof of a forgotten civilization, lies buried right now, waiting to be uncovered? There's another layer to this mystery. Some ancient texts describe the god Thoth, guardian of wisdom, as the one who sealed the Hall of Records. According to myth, he placed spells of protection over it, ensuring that only when humanity is ready would the chamber be opened. Was this just symbolic poetry, or did the priests of Egypt really hide something beneath the Sphinx, locking it away until the right time? Skeptics argue there's no proof, but evidence of hidden chambers, restricted excavations, and ancient accounts of secret libraries keep the mystery alive. And here, as the most fascinating part, Case predicted that the Hall of Records would be discovered near the end of the 20th century or the beginning of the 21st. That's our time. Could we be standing on the edge of a revelation thousands of years in the making? If the Hall of Records is ever opened, the knowledge inside could rewrite history. It could prove that Egypt was not the beginning, but the continuation of something far older. It could confirm the existence of Atlantis or shatter the boundaries of what we believe about human origins. For now, the Sphinx gazes silently across the desert, guarding its secret. The sands shift, the winds blow, and the mystery remains sealed. But many believe that one day soon, the Hall of Records will reveal itself. And when it does, humanity may never be the same again. If the Hall of Records is real, it holds the power to change everything we know about history. But Egypt's mysteries don't end there. Because even today, hidden beneath desert sands and within temple walls, secrets are still being discovered, secrets that point to advanced knowledge far beyond what we've been taught. Chapter 8. Hidden knowledge in plain sight. Sometimes the greatest secrets aren't buried underground. They're carved into plain sight right before our eyes. The temples, walls, and monuments of Egypt are not only works of art, they're coded messages, carrying knowledge across thousands of years. Think of hieroglyphs. To most visitors, they're just beautiful pictures. Falcons, ankhs, scarabs, and eyes of Horus. But to the Egyptians, these were not just drawings. Each symbol carried layers of meaning, spiritual, mathematical, and astronomical. The ankh, for example, wasn't just the key of life. Its shape encodes the union of masculine and feminine, earth and heaven. The Eye of Horus isn't only a protective charm. Its proportions, when measured, mirror the structure of the human brain, specifically the pineal gland, which many traditions call the seat of consciousness. How could a civilization over 3,000 years ago embed such anatomical and symbolic precision? Was this knowledge passed down intentionally to hide wisdom in art? Look closer at the temples of Luxor, Karnak, and Abydos. Their walls are covered with carvings of gods, rituals, and processions. But behind the mythology lies coded science. At Abydos, some carvings even resemble modern machine shapes that look like helicopters, submarines, and airplanes. Scholars dismiss this as coincidence, a trick of overlapping hieroglyphs. But is it possible that these were records of advanced knowledge, remembered and preserved? The Temple of Dendera adds another mystery. Deep within its chambers lies the famous Dendera light carving. It shows figures holding what appear to be giant bulb-shaped objects, connected to a cable and powered by a pillar resembling an insulator. To mainstream archaeology, it's a mythological scene. But to others, it looks uncannily like electrical technology. Could the Egyptians have been preserving the memory of lost energy systems? Knowledge inherited from an earlier age. Pause and think about this. If you wanted to hide advanced knowledge from being destroyed, how would you do it? You couldn't store it on paper, would decay. You couldn't rely on oral stories, they'd distort. But carve it into stone, hide it in myth, and it survives for millennia. Could Egypt's myths be less about religion and more about encoding science and philosophy in symbolic form? Let's not forget astronomy. Nearly every temple in Egypt is aligned with the sky. The Temple of Karnak aligns with the rising of the midwinter sun. Abu Simbel was built so that twice a year, on exact solar dates, sunlight pierces into its innermost chamber, illuminating statues of the gods. Was this just religious ritual, or proof of precise astronomical knowledge encoded in architecture? Even the myths themselves may be hiding deeper truths. The story of Osiris being dismembered and reborn could be more than myth. Could symbolize cycles of destruction and renewal. Floods and rebirth, perhaps even the loss of Atlantis and the rise of Egypt. This idea that myths are coded history wasn't just a modern theory. The Egyptians themselves believed in Zep-Tepi the first time. A golden age when the gods walked among men, when order was established after chaos. Every ritual, every carving, every temple was an attempt to recreate that golden age on earth. In other words, the hidden knowledge of Egypt was never lost. It was disguised, embedded in stone, in myth, in geometry, hidden in plain sight until we were ready to see it. And here's the incredible part. Much of this knowledge is only becoming clear today in the age of modern science. The golden ratio, DNA spirals, astronomical alignments, all concepts that the Egyptians appear to have encoded thousands of years ago. Were they passing down wisdom meant for us, a future generation? If so, then Egypt isn't just a relic of the past. It's a message to the future, a time capsule written in symbols, waiting for us to decode it. And the more we look, the clearer it becomes. The Atlantean vision of recreating heaven on earth wasn't abandoned. It was hidden, waiting in plain sight. If Egypt's secrets were hidden in plain sight, then the question becomes, who left them for us, and what was their ultimate purpose? To find the answer, we must return to the skies, to stars that the Egyptians believed were the true home of their gods. Chapter 9. The Vision of Heaven on Earth for Thousands of Years. Philosophers, priests, and dreamers have asked, what is heaven? Is it a place beyond the stars? Would it be built here, on earth? The ancient Egyptians may have believed in both. To them, heaven wasn't just a distant promise. It was a vision they attempted to recreate, stone by stone, ritual by ritual, right on the banks of the Nile. But what exactly did that vision look like? And why were they so obsessed with manifesting heaven in earthly form? The temple as a cosmic map. Step into any ancient Egyptian temple, Karnak, Luxor, or Denderand. You don't just walk into a building, you walk into a cosmic diagram. The walls were covered with star charts, the ceilings painted as night skies, the floors designed to reflect the primeval mound of creation. Each temple wasn't just a place of worship, was a blueprint of the universe, a sacred laboratory where humans could connect with the divine. To the priests, performing rituals inside these temples was like tuning Earth to the frequency of the cosmos. They weren't just honoring gods, they were sensing humanity with heaven itself. But the temples were only the beginning. The real masterpiece was waiting on the Giza Plateau. The Giza Complex. Earthly stars, imagine this. 3 pyramids rising from the desert, lined perfectly with Orion's belt. The Sphinx facing directly east, watching the sunrise on the spring equinox. This wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate. The Egyptians engineered Giza as a mirror of the heavens, a reflection of the stars on earth. In other words, they didn't just look at the night sky and dream of heaven. They brought heaven down here. To stand in Giza was, in a sense, to stand inside a map of eternity. Life, death, and the eternal journey. Why go through all this trouble? Because the Egyptians didn't separate heaven from earth. To them, life and death were part of the same journey. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a launch pad for the soul. The shafts pointed to specific stars, guiding the pharaoh's spirit to rejoin the gods in the celestial realm. In their vision, the afterlife wasn't some vague paradise, was a structured, navigable landscape, a place where your soul traveled through trials, judgments, and transformations. By recreating heaven on earth, they believed they were preparing both the living and the dead to join the cosmic order. But here's the shocking twist: what if this vision wasn't only spiritual, but technological? A spiritual machine. Some researchers propose a daring idea. The Great Pyramid may not have been just symbolic, but functional. The inner chambers, the shafts, the geometric perfection, were they part of a massive energy system designed to channel Earth's natural forces? If true, then Egypt's attempt to recreate heaven on earth wasn't just about belief, was about harnessing reality itself. A fusion of science, spirituality, and power beyond what we imagine. Think about it. A civilization creating a machine of eternity, not to reach heaven after death, but to bring heaven here. The Atlantean legacy fulfilled. And this leads us back to Atlantis. According to legends, the Atlanteans dreamed of a golden age where humans lived in harmony with the cosmos, guided by higher wisdom. What if Egypt was the survivor of that dream? A society carrying fragments of Atlantean knowledge, trying to build a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The pyramids, the temples, the rituals were the Atlantean Vision reborn, heaven reconstructed on earth. The eternal question, so we're left with a choice. Were the Egyptians just myth makers, weaving beautiful stories into stone? Or were they visionaries who succeeded, if only for a moment, in turning Earth into a reflection of the stars? If heaven is order, beauty, and cosmic balance, then maybe, just maybe, they achieved it. Visual cue. Fade-out shot of the pyramids at night, stars glittering directly above them. For the conclusion, but if Egypt truly brought heaven to earth, why did that vision collapse, and what lessons does it leave us today? For over an hour, we've journeyed through mysteries of Atlantis, Egypt, and the possibility of an ancient vision, a dream, not of escaping this world, but transforming it. So here's the ultimate question. Did the ancient Egyptians truly succeed in recreating heaven on earth? The achievement, in a sense? Yes. Look at their monuments, vast pyramids aligned with the stars, temples designed as cosmic blueprints, sacred rituals that mirrored the cycles of creation. They took the heavens, the stars, the myths, the divine order and inscribed them into stone, into ritual, into everyday life. For centuries, anyone who walked through their temples wasn't just stepping into architecture. They were stepping into a living reflection of eternity. The fragility of the vision, and yet, the vision didn't last. Empires rose and fell. Faders came and went. The knowledge faded into myth, buried beneath sand and time. If Egypt had indeed inherited a fragment of Atlantean wisdom, perhaps this was the tragedy, that such a vision was too great, too fragile, to survive unchanged. The dream of heaven on earth collapsed not because it wasn't real, but because humans could not hold on to it forever. The deeper meaning, but maybe that's the point. Maybe Egypt's true legacy isn't in whether the pyramids were machines, or whether the gods were astronauts, or whether Atlantis ever existed. Maybe the real gift is the idea itself that humanity can strive for something greater, that we can build societies aligned with beauty, order, and higher purpose. That we don't have to wait for heaven, we can create it here. This is the Atlantean Vision, a dream that Egypt carried, preserved, and handed down through symbols, myths, and stone. A dream that still whispers to us today. So the question now is not about them, it's about us. If the Egyptians could attempt to bring heaven to earth thousands of years ago, what's stopping us now? Will we ignore the vision, letting it fade into forgotten myth? Or will we dare to pick it up again and shape our own world into something worthy of the heavens? If this journey into Egypt's forgotten vision made you think differently about history, about myth, and maybe even about our future, then don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the mysteries of history and science. Drop a comment below. Do you think the Egyptians truly recreated heaven on earth, or is it all symbolic myth? I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found value in this exploration, give it a like. It really helps the community grow and keeps us uncovering more hidden truths together. Because in the end, history isn't just about the past. It's about the visions we carry forward.